Daniel here. I hope you're doing really, really good today. In this episode, I'm talking to Natasha, who I connected with about 10 days ago. I'm really grateful for Natasha speaking to me. And if you would like to come on as a podcast guest, please do not hesitate to send me an email, daniel@insomniainsight.co. Now, before we start this episode, if you are just kind of starting treating your insomnia and you still don't have much sleep confidence, then you may not want to listen to this episode quite now. I think hearing of somebody else that has a real hard time sleeping, before they're starting to get better, can be a little bit anxiety provoking. So you may consider skipping it for now. But if you, on the other hand, you haven't even started treating your insomnia, I think this is really good. I think this will give you a sense of like, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people that have really bad insomnia as well. And also, if you have pretty good sleep confidence, you are really getting better. And then this, I don't think, will face you, and you will find some pearls here. So that being said, let's listen to Natasha's story. So thanks so much, Natasha, for coming on, and just go ahead and tell us. Oh, actually, Natasha, first, tell me how did you find my channel?
How did I find your channel? It's a very good question. Sorry. So I was very frustrated with all of the past solutions that I had tried and hadn't worked. And so I was constantly looking for next steps. And at a certain point, I felt very desolate because I felt as though I had tried everything, that there was out there in terms of recommended treatments. And somehow I think I typed in intensive brain. What's it?
Sleep retraining.
Yeah, brain intensive sleep retraining. I don't know how I came up across the concept, or maybe I typed something else into Google and search engine, and the terminology came up, and it led me to your YouTube site where you did a session on the very topic.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and it resonated so much with me. And then I started to explore, and I realized that you had a ton of videos and material on the topic, and that's how I came across you
Got
and
it.
your channel.
Got it. So yes, for all the listeners out there, that's how Natasha found it, and then I think you left a comment, or we sent an email messages, and that's how we connected. But yeah, so Natasha, yeah, just start from like the very beginning. Like, how did you start having trouble sleeping?
So I think I was all a couple of times in the past. I went out with friends, or went on some sort of social event where I didn't sleep very well the night before, for very innocent reasons, whether I stayed up late watching television or whatever the case may be. And I didn't feel refreshed. And I realized that I liked, I didn't like going to social events when I was not fully rested. And subsequently after, I think I developed a little bit of anxiety around going to social events that were important to me and not being refreshed. It may be as something as like an important job interview, or a dinner with important friends. And I would, before the event, I would be sleeping perfectly well. But then before such an important social event, I may lose. I may lose my sleep the night before.
Uh-huh.
But then I always bounce back. Once the event passed, I bounce back. And because I always bounce back, I didn't think it was something that needed any sort of medical attention or any sort of solution. I didn't think it was a problem. I just knew it was something that that happened every now and again. And in August of last year, I had a friend who I had an interest in, and he was from Europe, and I hadn't seen for 2 months. And so upon his return, I was super excited to see him. So in many ways, I think it represented an important social event for me.
Yeah.
And so the night before he returned to the country, I did not. I slept very poorly, and so after the first night, I think the second night I tried to force myself to sleep to some extent. Like I went to bed super early because I was like, I have to sleep well. I have to be refreshed, and I want to be able to see this person and have a good time. The second night, after going through putting a lot of pressure on myself to sleep, I think the I it broke my sleep was my sleep broke because of that approach. And then one night became two nights, and after a week of trying to force myself to sleep, I started to become concerned, and a pattern developed. And so the triggering event was not negative anxiety, but positive anxiety associated with this social event. And then after not sleeping for a week, I started to become super anxious and worried about my ability to fall asleep. And I think I made sleep a bit of a psychological thing. It may have become a psychological thing. After a week, I went to a sleep specialist to see a sleep specialist, and she gave me sleeping pills, Ambien.
Yeah.
And she had me use it for a week. She said, try to use the Ambien to regulate your sleep, and then come off it and see if your old sleeping patterns returned. After the first time I used it, after the week of using the Ambien, I came off the Ambien and I still had insomnia. And she made me go through several cycles of using this sleeping pills. Like after the first time I used it for a week, she said, okay, use it for 2 weeks. When that didn't work, she said, try it for 3 weeks, try it for 3 weeks again. And so I went through several cycles of trying to use Ambien and not getting, Ambien would make me, it would give me some sleep relief, very poor sleep quality, because I would get up in the next day feeling very tired.
Yeah.
But at least it allowed me to go to work and be somewhat functional. And my work was extremely analytical. And after using the Ambien, and not getting any results, she put me on a trial of Lunesta. Lunesta did not work for me. At that time, a period of, and she also did a sleep study, and she didn't see any underlying medical conditions. I also did blood work with my primary care doctor to ensure that there was no thyroid related problems or anything like that. After 3 months, so after that, during this phase, 3 months elapsed, and I shared at that time. I'm a super private person, so I didn't share what I was going through with my family. But after a while, 3 months, I told my family what was going on, because at that time it became a serious concern. I was hooked on pills and not getting any results. And at their prompting, they said, go to another sleep specialist. If this one doesn't help you, go to another sleep specialist. So it led me to another sleep specialist who I'm still sort of seeing today. And he tried a concoction of medicines. He gave me 5 pills. He gave me Xanax. He gave me trazodone. He gave me mirtazapine. He gave me a cocktail of 5 different antipsychotic and antidepressant medicines. And he said, use these. They target different things. And maybe, it will, after using it for some time, and there's something also called Rexulti.
So just to be clear, the goal was to use all these 5 pills at the same time.
Yeah, you start one night with the Rexulti. The next night you added the trazodone. The next night you added the mirtazapine. The next night, so after 5 nights, I was using all 5 of these pills, and I started to get serious palpitations, and I ended up going and chest pains. I ended up going to the emergency room, and then he said, "Okay, come off all of these 5 pills. I'll just have you use Rexulti and Xanax for a period of time." And so I ended up using Rexulti and Xanax for a period of like 2 months. And I would get some sleep relief, but not consistently. I would sleep one day, I would not sleep the next 3 days. And I don't know if my body was developing a tolerance for these medicines, but it seemed very strange that within a short span of time, within a 1 day or 2 days, I would get sleep relief from something one day, and then 2 days after, the medicine would be mute. So after, he did also sleep studies. His sleep studies said I had some minor apnea, which I didn't have when the problem first started. I didn't have any problems with breathing or snoring. And I was never a snorer, but he said I had minor apnea. So he tried to get me to use a CPAP machine, and I didn't respond well to the CPAP machine. He did EEGs, all kinds of tests. I did all kinds of stuff apart from seeing him. Like I tried acupuncture, massages. At the prompting of a family member, I even went to see a shaman.
No, are you serious?
No,
Okay.
I'm not serious. I was very desperate, and I think that I'm not religious too. I'm irreligious, but I was willing to try anything because
Wow.
at
Okay.
that time I had also come off of work and I had gone on to short-term disability because I could not function at my job. And I'm not talking about, like, I did a lot of research in forums, and there are people who may have 1 to 2 hours or 3 hours of sleep. I'm talking about going for days and days without not sleeping.
Yeah.
And I was really in a very bad state to the point where I needed to stop working. And I so I went to, and so within the span between January and February of this year, I must have seen 4 different psychiatrists.
Wow. Okay.
They had me at one point. They even had me use there's this treatment TMS or something where they connect electrodes to your brain and
Yeah.
send pulses through your brain. I even tried that with a psychiatrist. They were all always giving me medicines. So I probably have a list of 15 different antipsychotic and antidepressant medicines that I've used collectively from seeing all of these service providers. I also went to a naturopathic doctor who had me take all kinds of tests and give me a lot of naturopathic medicines and to combat high cortisol and all kinds of stuff. I went to all kinds. I thought that, okay, maybe after I was told that I had some minor apnea, and I knew that I couldn't breathe as freely through one nostril as I did the other, I went and I got a surgery on my a nasal surgery to try to clear my airways to make it even better. And this was not something that bothered me before, but I was at a point where I wanted to eliminate any root causes. So I even had a nasal surgery to try to make, to see if it helped this diagnosis of minor apnea. And I went to Spain like at the end of the year, and for the first time since having the issue, I was able to sleep on the plane. The only time I was able to sleep was on a plane returning from Barcelona. And 2 weeks before I emailed you, which was about 2 or 3 weeks, I think 3 weeks ago, I
Yeah.
went to Singapore on a 22-hour long plane flight with a hope with a hope of replicating the results that I had on the flight back from Spain. And so I went all the way to Singapore on this 22-hour trip and back, and I did, and somehow on the plane flight, I came to the conclusion that if I was not sleepy or tired, I would not fall asleep.
Wait.
Because
So I think I understood this correctly, but you flew to Singapore and back just to get some sleep?
just to get some sleep. Just
Wow.
to get some sleep.
Okay.
I went there for exactly 3 days, like 3 weeks ago. And at that point, because I tried everything you name it, I tried it. I even tried marijuana edibles.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything out there that I hadn't tried. The only thing in my mind that I hadn't tried was Reiki. But I tried every single thing under the sun that you can think about. I tried. I even purchased they call it an alpha stim device, like my own device where you try to put
Yeah.
how do you say currents
The
through
current. Yeah.
your brain.
Yeah.
So I even purchased my own one. So I was desperate, and I didn't have any hope at all. I said, okay, maybe I just need to resign. And my situation, like I hear a lot of people with insomnia, they said, do not make the insomnia take over your life. They go to work and they try to push through. I returned to work part-time, and I just couldn't function. And then I was back on my couch, almost like a vegetable. So before I emailed you, I didn't have any hope. I was out of options. I was super depressed. And then when I came across your channel and I was like, my goodness, I wish I had seen this resource and, come across Daniel's channel from the inception. I would have taken a completely different path.
Yeah.
Because it's been 10 months since the issue first started, or my insomnia started.
Totally. I totally hear everything. And yeah, I as you know, I in work and through the channel, I interact with a lot of people with insomnia, and I'll say like that was one of the first thoughts when I as I hear you speaking here, the fact that you saw a sleep specialist like within 1 week of your insomnia starting may actually not have been great, because then that led you down this path of like you have an enormous amount of sleep efforts. Like you tried so many things, and as you probably have started to discover, like by watching my videos, like the more effort, the more things you try, typically the worse things get. But more on that later. So before this started, if we go back like a year and a half ago, you had like anticipating some kind of big event, you would have some trouble sleeping, but overall, like how much did you sleep, and from what time to what time would you sleep before this started?
So I was always what you called a nocturnal person.
Mm-hmm.
And I would watch, my way of winding down for the night was in bed watching television. And then around 12 o'clock, I would turn off the television, and it would take me about 4 to 5 minutes to, fall asleep. And
Yeah.
then I would have deep sleep, and I would get up in the morning feeling refreshed. And so that was a habit that I had for many, many years.
And just to be clear, like you would fall asleep maybe around 12:45, something like that, and then and what time would you wake up in the morning?
I would wake up in the morning, probably 7:38, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
period where I was working from home, and I would wake up around 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you said like, you know, you couldn't like you absolutely couldn't keep a job, like you couldn't function. Can you describe what you felt?
Um, yeah, so I felt very destroyed, like exhausted.
Yeah.
I felt, but the biggest challenge was cognitive difficulties. I had headaches. I couldn't really focus on what people were saying. I had to it took a lot of effort to really be focused and make sense. Um, and yeah, so it was like a brain fog almost,
Yeah.
and trying to push through the fog.
Yeah.
So mentally, I felt almost impaired, and
Yeah.
physically, I was definitely, in a very bad state. And at the start of at the start of the problem, even though I was exhausted, I was able to still function, and still articulate myself in a meaningful way. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, the body really is a very interesting thing, because it's something like if I didn't have went for a week without sleep, historically I wouldn't have thought I would be able to stand up or even continue. But I was able to function in that state for at least 2-3 months before I start to really crash.
Yeah. And like at this point in time, are you still taking some medications or like or not?
So when I said I shared that I went to Singapore 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was taking something called circular quietapine.
Seroquel. Okay.
And it's so one of the things that and I hope I'm not sharing this out of sequence, is that when I take these medications, over time the quality of sleep got worse and worse.
Yeah.
And like
I think are you broke up a little bit, Natasha? Are you hearing me?
the thoughts in my mind. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, no. Okay, so you broke up for a second there, but I think we heard that like as you were taking these medications, your sleep actually kind of got worse and worse.
Yeah, over time the sleep quality got worse and worse.
Exactly.
Not just the frequency, with which I was able to get some sleep relief, but also the quality. So even though I was taking the medications, I would lie down and I would be I wouldn't be fully unconscious. I would be semi-conscious. I would be aware of the thoughts in my mind, which based on the research that I did seem to indicate that it was the very, stage 1 sleep or stage 2 sleep, like very
Mhm.
light sleep,
Yeah.
where I would not completely lose consciousness. But I would get up, and these medicines, even though they didn't give me, a good quality of sleep, at least I was able to get up and be somewhat functional the next day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So up until 3 weeks ago, I was taking Seroquel for like a good month, and getting some level of sleep relief here and there, but not consistently. Then I listened to your program and your channels, and I decided that CBT-I is what was what I needed to do. And I went into my cabinet and I threw away all of the sleeping aids and medicine. And I
Wow.
said, I
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
want to see a doctor ever again.
I hear. Now, here's one thing I have to ask you, which is, you've seen like 4 psychiatrists and 2 sleep specialists, and you didn't come across CBTI before that?
So I saw more than 4 psychiatrists, more than 2 sleep specialists. I saw at least 4 sleep specialists. I did at least 4 different sleep studies separately. Now I did CBT. I did also see a psychologist for CBT, what they call CBT for sleep. Her approach was very much focused on the sleep hygiene.
Ah.
So darkening the room, making it quiet, getting out of bed at a certain time, going to bed at a specific time, shortening, there was some amount of sleep restriction, shortening the amount of time in bed. Um, Now, I think, so she, I think, understood, a lot of the principles, some of the principles of CBTI. Somehow, she, when I told her that I got tired, I was exhausted, but I never got sleepy. I said that exact thing to her, she said that, you must get sleepy. I said, define sleepy. And I think that was the pivotal time, when I realized that CBTI was, the solution for me. Because when I
Yeah.
asked you what sleepy was, you told me that sleepy is when is different from being tired.
Yeah.
Sleepy is when, you feel as though you can't keep your eyes open. Her feedback to me when I asked her what sleepy was, she said it's when you're yawning.
Mm.
And so as soon as I felt, myself yawning a little bit, I said, okay, this is sleepy. Even though in my heart I knew I wasn't sleepy, I said,
Yeah.
according to her definition, this is sleepy. Let me go to bed. So I would go to bed, and then she gave me. So I would go to bed when I perceived myself to be sleepy, even though I was super alert. Like super
Okay.
alert. I
I
would go to
hear.
bed and said, okay, let me go to. So I went to bed, and then of course, I tried to. I got into this habit of forcing myself to sleep. I
Yeah.
think this was the crux part of the, this, how you say, perpetuated, made the problem even
Yeah.
worse. So
Exactly.
it was months and months of going into bed, either with sleep aids or no sleep aids, and forcing myself to sleep.
And during this time, like, what time did you like? What time have you been like going to sleep?
It varied over, I would have phases. There would be phases where I tried to go to bed 10:30, 11.
Yeah.
Um, Initially, I tried to get a certain time where I got out of bed, and I did get some results the first time that I practiced her version of CBTI, in a sense that when I got out of bed at a certain time in the morning, the first 2 nights or so, I felt sleepy, and
Yeah.
I dozed on my couch. And it was
Okay.
a better
Okay.
quality sleep than what I got when the night before. And I dozed, but this was during the day.
Yeah.
Um, so the sleepiness came after, getting out, restricting my sleep and getting out of bed at a certain time, and but I will always felt sleepy in the morning or during the day as a result. Never at
Got it.
night.
And
I
and then, sorry to cut you off. Continue if you remember your line of thought there.
No, I was going to say that I didn't practice the technique right, in a sense. The other thing, I didn't practice stimulus control, in a
Hmm.
sense that I would go to bed, and it was during the winter, because the bulk of this, this issue was experienced during the winter when it was cold.
Yeah.
So I would go to bed, and if I found after an hour of not falling asleep, I was not disciplined enough to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I would stay in bed. The bed was so comfy, and I was like, "This is
Exactly.
torture. I'm not getting out." Or I
Yeah.
tried once or twice, but I didn't do it consistently. And I think one of the biggest challenges is with not feeling sleepy, and is that you know that you have to get up at a set time in the morning. Let's say 6:30 a.m. And as the morning approaches, I'm watching television or doing some activity, mostly watching television. But as the morning approaches, I am super alert. I may not
Yeah.
be tired during the day, but I'm super alert at night for whatever reason. And 1 o'clock comes, 2 o'clock comes, 3 a.m. comes. And I see the window of my potential sleep getting shorter and shorter, and I start to panic. That in itself creates some level of anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have the self-discipline to adhere to the fact that if I'm not sleepy or tired, don't go to bed. So even though I may have had the best of intentions, as the window approached, the 6:30 window approached, 3 a.m. came, I just jumped into bed. I said, I can't stay up. I have to, get some relief. And then
Exactly.
I jumped into bed. So I didn't fail, as though I practiced the CBT right. And after working with her for 3 weeks, um, she turned to me and she said, well, I think you ought to use medicines for now,
Really?
because CBT is
Okay.
not for everyone.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, this is a lot to be learned from your story here, Natasha. And now, as we move forward here, I think the next thing I wanted to talk about was, so we connected a couple of weeks ago, and I think I know that to some extent you've been exploring, my channel and so far, like, what have you been trying to do in the last few weeks, and how are you doing?
So I think it's probably shorter than a few weeks.
Yeah,
Probably
you're probably right. It's
just
probably
one
just
week.
like 10 days, maybe something like that.
Exactly. So I started. I started. I listened to all of your, the material that you had in videos, and I think I got a good understanding of the CBT-I technique thanks to your material. It was a wealth of resources. I appreciate that. And also based on the feedback that you and I, you provided when you and I communicated. So I felt as though I was armed with a solid enough understanding to go ahead with CBT-I and try to do it right. So about 5 days ago, I started to use a sleep restriction technique, where I set my wake up time at 6:45 a.m. in the morning. Um, what I'm doing differently now is that 8 to 9 hours before I go to bed, I try not to look at the clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I also have the aim, because I want to be real strict, sleep restriction. I also don't want to be in bed for more than, let's say, 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So my aim generally is to, not go to bed, let's say, before 11 a.m.
PM, you mean?
11 p.m. Thank you for the correction.
Sure.
11 p.m. Um, so I've been going to bed anytime I feel there's a potential for sleep.
Yeah.
um, beyond that time, and then getting up at a specific time in the morning. The first night, I went to bed. I think around, it must have been, I stayed up because I wasn't sleepy. I stayed up until I think 2:45 a.m. and I went to bed and I didn't sleep, and I got up at 6:45 completely destroyed. The second night, I went to bed a bit earlier, probably around 12 a.m. I wasn't sleepy though, but I was very tired and exhausted and fatigued. But I felt as though there was, because of the level of exhaustion that I felt as though there was still some potential for sleep. So I went to bed at around, midnight, and I fell asleep very quickly. And when I got up before the alarm at 6:45, my body woke up at 6:30, a few minutes before my alarm went off, and I
Mm-hmm.
opened my eyes, and it was the first night that I lost consciousness. And I say lost consciousness, meaning not aware of my thoughts during the night. or don't
Wow.
have a memory of being aware of my thoughts during the night, and got up and
Yes.
think that I had a better quality of sleep for the first time without any sleeping aids.
Wow.
And this was on the second night, and it felt really, really good. I actually had the energy and I to get out of my house
Amazing.
and do things that I never did before. The third night, I was so inspired. And then I think you told me about this program by a colleague of yours.
Yes.
And so I signed up for his program because I watched the video with Ellen, who said that she also signed up for his
Yeah.
program.
Right.
And I also watched his a video, a sleep resource that he had on his on website. And I watched a few other videos on your website. One with somebody called Audra, I think
Oh yeah.
episode
Right.
10.
Yeah.
And she talked about her anxiety about oversleeping, and somehow watching that video and stuff made me anxious. It made me super anxious, and I said maybe what I need to do is a total sleep detox where I abstain from those watching videos so that I don't think of sleep and I don't feel that anxiety when it's time to sleep at night. So with that said, I told I can't remember his name. I think it's Michael or
Martin. Yeah.
Martin. I told Martin that I was going to put his program on hold for like a little while. So I've been trying sleep restriction, um, and so after the second night of success, the third night, because of the level of anxiety I felt, I didn't sleep. I had a really rough night.
Yeah.
The fourth night. And again, I'm not going to bed. I haven't been going to bed when I'm sleepy. So when I get up at 6:45 in the morning and I go on my couch, I am sleepy. Like my eyelids are drooping, and I have to fight the urges to not to
To
sleep.
sleep at
I
that
have to
time.
I walk around and I try to do things. I try to get on my toes. Um, and through the day I may feel tired, and I would go out in the sunlight and do things that are energizing. And
Good.
surprisingly, I start to feel alert as the day progresses. When nighttime comes, I'm super alert. So all of that sleepiness that I feel goes out of the window as the day progresses. So when the night comes, I've been going to bed. I haven't had a courage to go to bed when sleepy, because I'm not getting sleepy. I'm still not getting sleepy at night, but I do feel very, very tired.
Mm-hmm.
So the fortnight when I went to bed, and these, I think I've been practicing the CBT-I now for 5 days. But a fortnight I went to bed. I went to bed strictly because I was specifically because I was tired, not sleepy. Now, if I had to go to bed if I was sleepy, it probably would mean pulling an all-nighter.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel tired,
Yeah.
but as the morning approaches, if you're not sleepy, don't go to bed.
Yeah.
And it's actually a scary thought and a scary process to think of yourself completely not going into bed at all for a full 24 hours. So I
Yeah.
haven't yet tried that. Um, so I've had I've within the 5-day period, I've had 2 times where I went to bed and I got some level of sleep relief. Not, I wouldn't say it's a high quality sleep, because I get up, when I open my eyes, I feel a wave of exhaustion, like a heat wave that's almost passing through my body. And then when I get up, I'm totally like destroyed. To the point where I'm sleepy. But it's true that it's been 5 days where I've not used any sleeping aids, any medicines whatsoever. So it's been a rough 5 days.
Yeah. Totally hear that. And you may have heard me say this in one of the videos that whenever you come off any like sleep aid, you're expected to have rebound insomnia. Like insomnia is supposed to get worse. So the fact that so basically what's happening now, it's not surprising given the fact that you're both coming off a lot of medications and you're embarking on this on the CBT-I that you've been doing. I wanted to ask you a couple of things. Like one was, as you mentioned, you often feel like actually sleepy during the day, tired, but then as the day goes by, you feel more and more alert, and particularly like nighttime, you feel super alert. Why do you think that's happening?
That was actually one of my questions for you.
Okay,
No, but let me try to see if I can.
absolutely.
Um, you know, it's come me to the point where I said, this is a question for Danielle. This is something that I don't
Yeah.
understand.
No, I
Um,
have the answer to it. Definitely have the answer, but I'm curious about like your thought process.
yeah, well, it made me wonder about my cardiac rhythm.
Okay.
It made me wonder about that. It made me wonder about that. Um,
You know what? I have another question that it's actually
mhm,
kind of the same question, but
mhm.
why do you think when you flew back from Barcelona and
Yes.
you fell asleep that time,
Mhm.
but you didn't really have that experience flying to Singapore? Any thoughts on
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So my thought is that as time progresses and insomnia becomes more chronic, the chances of sleeping like I did, like a baby, on the flight back from Barcelona becomes it becomes harder to do. I feel as though the insomnia becomes more ingrained. So I feel as though if I had started CBT-I earlier in my, after getting experiencing the issue, my chances of recovering would have been higher. And I think the more chronic and the more ingrained insomnia becomes, I think the more patient you have to be and the more time it may take to recover. And the reason why I felt that my thinking was along these lines is because I noticed that even with medicines, over time, the quality of sleep in response to medicines became poorer and poorer, which to me was a signal that my insomnia is getting worse. It's not getting
Right,
better. So that's
right.
the first thought. So now, before the Barcelona trip, I didn't sleep on the way to Barcelona, but I slept on the way back. I had pulled an all-nighter. I
Yeah.
didn't. I kept my eyes. I think I somewhere I read about, some sort of technique where you try to keep your eyes open and that makes you sleep or something like that.
Right,
But
right.
I didn't feel sleepy and I didn't sleep the night before. It was I probably like the first night that I pulled an all-nighter. So I stayed in my hotel room and I kept my eyes open all night. I didn't sleep a wink. And then I got up and I got onto the plane. So I went on the plane totally exhausted. Now on my way to Singapore, I also didn't sleep the night before, and I had doses, like very light doses on the plane. But
Yeah,
but I had light doses on the plane. Like,
yeah.
I was sleepy. I was feeling some level of sleepiness on the plane, but I had light doses on the way to Singapore. The night before traveling back from Singapore, I actually took a Seroquel, and it gave me a little bit of sleep relief because I was very exhausted in Singapore. So I took a Seroquel because I didn't want to be too harsh on my body, and I got a little bit of sleep relief the night before going back to coming back to the U.S. from Singapore.
Got it.
So when I got in the plane, I was not as exhausted. I was not as tired. But I said, it's a 22-hour ride. I must sleep. There must be. I was so confident that I would have some sleep relief. And after I was super alert. And after about 6 hours had passed, I closed my eyes and I tried to force myself to sleep, which is sort of what I do every night when I'm at home. I close
Yeah.
my eyes and I try to sleep and force myself to sleep on the plane. And I went into this semi-conscious trance almost, where I've lost a little bit of consciousness, but I'm still, not fully unconscious. And there's stories popping through my mind. And after like 2 or 3 hours in this trance-like state, I opened my eyes and I realized, and that's when I had the light bulb moment that I can't force myself to sleep.
Right, right,
I
right.
cannot force myself to sleep. I can only sleep when there's some sort of like a precursor there. At the time, I didn't think sleepiness, but I thought tiredness. I couldn't sleep when I was tired, and I
Mm.
came back. That was the thought that was in my mind all the way back. And I came back and I said to my family, because they were like, "Did you sleep?" I said no, but I actually made a discovery, and the discovery is that I'm not able to sleep if I'm alert. And forcing myself to sleep just makes it worse. And
That's
there's
yeah,
something that I call
big.
insomnia sleep, where if you have very light sleep and you get up, there's a fogginess in your head.
Yeah.
Like you actually feel worse than when before you actually went to bed and tried to
Right.
sleep.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to touch on here, and to kind of answer the question I gave you, I'm pretty confident this is what's happening. Like, you fly to Barcelona, and you fly back, and you don't have any particular anticipation that you're going to sleep on the flight. It just happened that time. And then now the second time, when you are flying to Singapore, it's very different. Now it's a sleep effort. Now you're trying to do something to produce sleep, which is not going to work, because now you have anticipation, you're expecting it, you're building up, you're building up anxiety towards this, and you're monitoring, you're checking, like, is this going to work? Am I going to sleep? Is it going to be like the last time, etc.? So, and it's the same time when it comes to like the circadian thing, that when it's 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, and you're supposed to be up, you're supposed to be awake, you're not supposed to sleep, then you feel like, now I'm tired, now I'm maybe even sleepy. But as the day goes along and that sleep window approaches, and you're like, okay, I'm getting closer to that time when I'm going to sleep. Am I going to sleep tonight? Am I not going to sleep? Am I going to 1 hour? That is what is keeping you from sleeping.
Ha. And that's actually a scary thought, because it means that it's all very psychological. And it means it's very psychological. And that's a very scary thought, because I'm not aware of the anxiety. Like I do things to, distract myself during the day, but I'm so tired. I'm sort of waiting for the night. I'm waiting to go to bed. It's true. But it's like when you, and you're exactly right, but it's a scary thought. So what advice do you give to somebody who's experiencing that?
Well, yeah, we're gonna, I'm gonna get to like more of that as we move along. Just one thing right now that I want to say is this: everybody has a little bit of a different story when it comes to their insomnia. But I want you to know that I've heard everything you told me. I've heard many, many times before.
Yes.
And I say, and this is so important for you to know, that you're a very special person, Natasha. You're a very special person. But your insomnia is just plain old ordinary insomnia. Nothing new there, And it's so important to recognize that, because what works for other people is going to work for you too. There's no reason you are not going to get over your insomnia. You will get over it if you just, recognize that what works for other people is going to work for you too. So that, I think that is like one of the big insights. And then, what you have, like, your thought process is also so typical, meaning you try more and more things, and you're getting diminishing returns. Like, the medication that at least helps you a little bit is no longer working, and your conclusion is that it's because the insomnia is getting worse. But in fact, it's not. It's just like, you're getting tolerance to the medications. They're expected not to work, and your insomnia is actually just the same. But your notion that, like, you feeling that another thing has failed, etc. That's what's driving the insomnia. So I guess in a way you can say the insomnia is worse, but it's not actually like the insomnia is a thing and it gets worse. It's like the more you try, the more that fails, the more that builds up anxiety. So it's the efforts that is the problem. It's not like the insomnia itself has changed.
Yeah. And that is such an interesting, first of all, I appreciate that resonates a lot with me and makes perfect sense. The thought that I have when you say that is, I'm not somebody, I don't, there are people that feel the anxiety, and it's palpable.
Right.
I'm not conscious of the anxiety.
And,
I'm really not.
Natasha, I'm sorry. Guess what? What you're saying right now, classic. I hear that all the time. All the time. People are just like, but I don't feel anxiety. I'm not anxious. And I'm like, you don't feel it? And it's not necessarily like anxiety. It's maybe more of what I call like hyperarousal, like hypervigilance, preoccupation. Yes. You're kind of like thinking about it, monitoring that, checking things,
Yes.
Which is not maybe frank anxiety, but it's like in the same realm of things, like, hypervigilance, hyperarousal,
Yes.
But and here's maybe the most important thing I'm going to say today to you is that second night, off medications, you were like unconscious, as you call it, for quite a stretch of time, particularly comparing to have you done before.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you should really, really be focusing on right now. You should like play that up, like write it down, tell your family that I had this one night on my second night of CBT-I where I actually did really good. The more you focus on that, like the more you focus on the like the silver lining, the little sliver of hope, that thing that happened,
Mm-hmm.
the more and more of those nights you're gonna get for sure. The more you focus on like, okay, this was not really good, I feel really tired today. Like the more you think of that, the more entrenched the insomnia becomes,
Yep. Yep.
And what else was I gonna say here? And yeah, oh yeah, now I remember. You've probably come across maybe comments or maybe videos about somebody named Ellen.
Yes, I did. I watched her video and her journey. Yeah, it was super interesting. I think it was among the first videos that I watched.
Oh yeah, because I bet you haven't listened to this one because I just uploaded it like an email from her earlier today. But a lot of the things that you tell me remind me of her, and time wise too. Like she had insomnia for about 9 months, and she was in the state where she was like completely confident that she typically didn't sleep a minute, like zero, or maybe 1 or 2 hours. And she couldn't even fathom herself how she was awake. She thought that her sleep cycle was completely off. She thought she had like a 48-hour cycle and she needed like 28 hours to even become sleepy, etc. And
Yes.
and in this last email she's reading to me today that I made that I uploaded just earlier, she's basically like one step away from being completely cured.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh my
It's like
goodness.
remarkable. So you definitely have to listen to that today.
But I would like to, I'm curious to know. So, in my case, I talked about going to bed when I'm tired, not sleepy. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And sometimes I think to myself that, maybe I'm not allowing the treatment to be effective, the technique to be effective, if I'm selling myself short by going to bed at, 1 a.m. because I'm tired and
Yeah.
not sleepy. So there's that. And my question would be, how strict was Ellen in her practice? Did she, like, if she found herself approaching morning, did she not go to bed when she's tired and only when sleepy? That would be one question. And then the second question, how strictly did she practice stimulus control? Because I haven't been very, very good at practicing stimulus control. And to give you an example, last night I went to bed at 11. After 2 hours, I got out of bed. And during the 2 hours, I I was in this very light stages of sleep where I was conscious without thoughts, conscious with my thoughts. And after 2 hours, I jumped up somehow, and I realized that I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping. And I went out. I got out of bed after 2 hours, and I went on my couch. I stayed on my couch for 30 minutes. I went back into bed at 2:30, and I couldn't sleep. I stayed in bed for like another 2 hours, and then I got out of bed at 4:30 and I went back on my couch. And then I went back to bed like 5 and I said, okay, and I just have an hour and a half, 45 minutes left.
Okay, got it.
Um, it's not, and I recognize that this is probably not something that Ellen would have done. So my question is, how strict is she? Because her story, her recovery story is definitely inspiring. And I would be curious to know, how strict was she in practicing those two things, not going to bed when tired but when sleepy, and also getting out of bed when when she was not sleeping. And thirdly, how long did it take for her recovery to happen?
Yeah, I have like partial answers to all of that. And by the way, I'm sure Ellen's been super active. I'm sure she's going to listen to this and give you specific answers. And I'm going to ask her to do that actually. But to answer your questions, she did write in one of the emails to me that like it started like she did have a turning point when she did quote unquote strict CBT-I. Like she says that when she was more, she really followed it. That's kind of when things became better for her. And also she did say in one of the emails, actually the one I read today, that she hated she hated stimulus control, she said, but when she started practicing it, she did better. Specifically, what she said was that she had a room set up for like if she couldn't sleep, she would go to there and read. And she said like initially she felt like she hated it. It felt like punishment. But then she was like, well, she somehow was able to turn like, negative sleep thought into positive one. She was like, well, I'm going to think about it this way. I'm going to get a chance to go to this room and get an opportunity to read my book. And so she was doing stimulus control. Um, and I think that it was like week 3 was like she wrote to me that at week 3 she was doing a bit better, but she was like, this is just a fluke. And then like week 4 she started feeling like, yeah, I think this is actually, I'm doing really well. So I think it was relatively quick, like 3 weeks, which is, that's not unusual at all, but it's always good not to expectations. So I bet like in your case, Natasha, just like talking to you and like, understanding your thought process and everything, like I don't see any reason why you wouldn't get over your insomnia. Like, will it take 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that? I don't know, but I'm confident you will. And I felt there was, wasn't there one more thing I just was about to say? Oh yeah. Going back to like kind of like strategies, etc. I think the fall. Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm going back. There's so many things I want to say. How do you know that you were up like 2:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m.? Weren't you going to stop checking the time at 11?
That's a very, very good question. It's an excellent question. Thank you for that. So, I envy the people that read and are able to distract themselves. One of my challenges is that reading, since my insomnia started and I've gone to bookstores many times, reading doesn't do it for me. Like when I get up, and something about turning on a light and reading also makes me feel as though I'm becoming super alert. And I don't have the energy sometimes to read. So the fallback is always either the television or an iPad. And if you go on the iPad, you see, even if you try not to,
Right.
you do, when you turn it on, you do see the time. So that's the culprit right there. So if I don't want to watch the time at all, and it's a very excellent point, because when you brought it up, I was like, if I'm really practicing, ditch the clock, I really need
Yeah.
to ditch the clock, and I'm
That's
not
right.
really ditching the clock. But to ditch the clock, I need to put aside the my iPad and my cell phone. Now I can watch television, of course, where I don't see the clock. My problem is that I have a 72-inch television on my wall. And even though I may be able to dim the lights on my iPad, like I put there's, you can change the tone so that it's warmer and you're not getting all that blue light and stimulation. And I do not, I also do not want to, become, how to say, obsessed with all of these sleep hygiene things, like don't watch blue light and all that stuff. My 72-inch television on the wall is concerning, because when I turn it on and I'm watching a drama, I swear the lights are so bright that there's a part of me that thinks that even though I don't want to, blue light may not affect me that much. This is a 72-inch television that I'm watching. Do I need an alternative? So I feel as though my activities for winding down, back to just to stay on focus, because of that, I've been reluctant to turn on my 72-inch TV. And I'm not reading a book. And if I listen to music or, watch something on my iPad, so I either do one of two things: either listen to music on my iPhone, which means turning on my phone, and or watching or watching a drama on my iPad. So even though I don't look at the time before I go to bed, when I do come out of bed, I do inadvertent,
Exactly. No, I
unintentionally look
totally,
at the time.
I
But it's a
totally
good
hear you.
question, because it makes me challenge my own practice. Like if I really want to ditch the clock, maybe I need to find something that will not make me lose the, look at the time when I get up. But beyond that, just one other thing real quickly.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
sure.
you do also have, I think, a sense of passing time. For example, if you get up and the sky, and I think I mentioned this, if the sky starts to lighten up, then you have a sense that, it's coming close to the wake up time.
Yeah. No, I totally get everything you're saying, and I think you know this too, what I'm about to say, but just for kind of other people who listen there, I think uh, if you do if you do this approach where you're like, after this time, I'm not going to check the time, then yes, you have to come up a way of you like really not knowing the time, and if you, and that is really good for people that have a lot of sleep anxiety. Like I have a very short window. The ditch the clock time is a very good approach, but you know, if people don't have a problem with that kind of anticipating the sleep time, etc., then the kind of militant CBT-I can work too, where you just like say, okay, I'm not going to go to bed before 12, and I don't care if I watch the time or not, but I'm going to get up by this time. That can work as well. But um, so we talked about that, and I felt there was one more thing I wanted to say right now. But yeah, I think in conclusion, you know, I think, you know, you obviously have understood a lot of things, and I think it's just a matter of like patience right now, and also like the key thing for everyone really, and for you too, Natasha, is like and you know this, but I'm just repeating it, like like insomnia loves attention. Like the more clock watching, the more monitoring, the more you think about how am I feeling and how's that related to how much I slept, and the more things like that you do, the worse things are going to get, and the harder it's going to be to overcome insomnia. So so all this thing being said, like I think honestly, if you just like you know, keep in mind everything we talked about, if you just keep going, and oh yeah, here's another thing I want to say, which was like, you know, whenever I interact with people, like it's oftentimes the following, like I get an email, I respond to it, and then I get a follow-up email like 5 days later, and it's like, this is not working, like I have a setback, things not working. And when that happens, I think this is, you may have heard this, but I think the perfect analogy is like your goal is to like feel great and be really happy and not worry about sleep. And that is like the mountaintop where you're trying to go. And like every time you are not sleeping well or things happen, that's like a rock that you stumble upon. And if you're gonna focus on that rock, like, oh, I didn't sleep again, what did I do wrong? What am I going to do differently? How much sleep? Then you're never gonna reach that mountaintop. You have to be forward looking and just keep going.
I appreciate that. That's like so powerful. So thank you for that.
Anytime. And I think if you're open to it, I would be more than happy to like do another, like call you again in, let's say, like 2-3 weeks or something like that, or we can just keep in touch via email or something.
Well, of course, and I would love to. It would be a pleasure. It would be a pleasure. But I do have, I think, one specific question for you.
Sure.
And I do have, I think I have like 3 outstanding questions if there is time.
Absolutely, yeah. Fire away.
So the first question, and I touched upon it earlier, but I didn't ask it clearly. And here, you know, this is more your recommendation. So I'm practicing this technique, and I'm committed to it. And I want to, you know, position myself in the best place for recovery possible. So the question is, because you talk about the difference between being tired and being sleepy, and I talked about being exhausted, like beyond fatigued at night, to the point where I feel almost like a vegetable. And, you know, I think, my goodness, let me go to bed because I'm in such a bad state, right? Like I am not even able to, like if I'm reading a book, I'm not able, well, I don't just, there's an poor example, but if I'm watching a drama, like I stop focusing on the drama, how tired I am, and there's not much else I can do. But I'm not sleepy because my eyes are not droopy. And I know, because I've experienced sleepy in the morning, I know what sleepy feels like. So I'm not sleepy. So is there a recommendation to avoid going to bed when you're in this really fatigued, exhausted state, and try, you know, for the sake of, of practicing in a very, as in the best way possible, to try to resist going to bed only when my eyelids are drooping? So that's the first question, direct question.
Yeah, you know, I actually kind of like thought about that myself as I was talking to you, and there are kind of 2 approaches here. If you feel that you are brave enough, you're up for it, and you can maintain wakefulness during the day, like you're not afraid that you'll sleep during the day, then you could try like okay, I'm really going to commit, and it may take 48 hours or something like that until this works. But I will commit to, like, I will not go to bed unless I feel sleepy, mindlessly happy. That's like one approach. It's, the more kind of tougher one, but I think that could work. But I think the other one could work too, meaning like, if it's past 11 p.m. and I feel really drained and exhausted, I allow myself to go to bed just to rest. I don't expect to sleep, but I'm just gonna rest. And as long as you get up at your sleep at the early time, your wake up time, you stay up during the day, I think eventually too you will do fine at that too. I don't think, I think that also eventually is going to work.
Okay, so it's just the expeditiousness with how effective, the time frame within which you may get results.
Yeah, exactly. I think with the option A may be a little faster, but option B is maybe less anxiety, and I think both will be fine.
Yeah, and that's, it sort of resonates with my own thinking, because when I went to bed when I was super exhausted, in those instances, even the day I did that, when I had like some sleep, like on the third day, I said I don't expect to sleep, but I'm so destroyed, I'm just going to give my body, be gentle with myself and give my body a little time to rest. So thank you for that response.
Sure.
Two other questions. One
Sure.
is, like I said, Ellen's results is so, so good to hear. It's so inspiring. But I know that she had started Martin's program. Did she find? I've chosen not to start Martin's program. Initially, I was thinking that Martin's program would complement what I'm doing. But when I sent him an email and I said that I am practicing sleep restriction, he said that his response to me was, don't practice sleep restriction until it's time to do so, until we get to that point. So he had a very methodical approach, whereas I want to do sleep restriction now. He was going to, he did it came later down the road in his program.
Yeah.
So Mike, I'm curious to know whether Ellen was able to get to her results with using, following Michael's program. So that's the second question. I guess it's more a question for Ellen.
Oh yeah, I think I know that answer to that. I think she's actually on week 4 of his program, and she feels that both like interacting with me and that program has been very helpful to her.
So he was advocating no sleep restriction.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand his approach too, because he does have a method, like I want you to focus on this now, and then we get to that point later, and it may be difficult to veer from that program. But I think, like, same thing with the first question you had. I think ultimately, if you do the program or not, I think it could help you because you have maybe more accountability, and maybe somebody that is more interacting with you on a more regular basis than I am. But again, whatever you do, like, commitment is the best thing. Like, if you do the program, then commit to it and stick to it. Or if you say not to, then like let some weeks go or something like that. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, sir, for that answer.
Sure.
Because she has gotten some positive results in a very short time. So I'd be curious to know if, she felt as though it was, Michael's program helped, because then I would second guess, and I think maybe I should go back to, try Michael's program.
Well, it's good. As I said to you in the mail there too, like, it's Martin, by the way. Martin, he's going to be there for the foreseeable future. So if you find, like, if you're like 3 weeks down the line, you're like, maybe you should try it, it'll be there.
It'll be there. Okay. And then one of the things that I do is I'm like a gym fanatic. Speaking of similarities to Ellen. So when I get up in the morning, I go on the treadmill for, 50 minutes. And I don't have energy in my tank. So there's a part of me that thinks I'm running in cortisol. But I don't want to stop exercising because it's probably like the only thing that I have now. And I hope I'm not negatively impacting my progress by doing such an intense workout. Any thoughts on that?
Not at all. I think you should absolutely not cut down on that. It's not having any negative impact on your results. And basically, the more you do during the day, the more active you are, the more preoccupied, the more you keep away from thinking about sleep, the better.
And one final question, believe it or not.
Okay, sure.
that big 72-inch television on my wall. Am I being, how do you say, like obsessive or whatever by thinking that it makes me alert at night?
I think here this question is a little bit like you'll get a little bit different answer from very very reasonable people, like including Martin and Mike and a lot of people like that. But personally, I don't think the TV is the problem. I think it's more like, yes, if you if you uh, have this sense that it's a huge TV and it emits a lot of light and that must make me really alert, then that's a problem. But I don't think the TV itself actually is a problem.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and that helps to, I think, alleviate my anxiety with getting out of bed and then putting
Yeah.
on this big bright screen. Because then I said, my goodness. I said I had one last question, but any before closing, I know you said that we talked about me feeling sleepy earlier in the day and me not feeling sleepy, as the day progresses because of the anxiety toward, as bedtime approach. Do you have any other techniques besides what I'm already doing? That well, do you have any other techniques? Am I missing anything, or am I doing all the right things? And there's nothing else that I can do that's outside of my control to solve that. The fact that I don't feel sleepy at night.
Yeah, I think actually now there are two things that pop into my mind. The first one is like I think this author that I really like, her name is Sasha Stevens. She writes in one of her like little snippets. She writes like the headline is like, "Am I doing it right?" And then the kind of her insight on that is like, if you're asking yourself if you're doing it right, you're not, because you're not supposed to like do things to improve your sleep. That's just a little side note, but more important, I think. Yeah, what I hear is like it's all good. The one thing that you could, the two things is like when somebody's feeling sleepy when they're not supposed to be sleeping, let's say in the morning or the afternoon or something like that, you should like anything is allowed. Anything is allowed to make you not sleep. Meaning, if that means getting up on your toes, having a snack, having a shower, having some coffee, anything goes. That's one thing. And and more specific thing here. Uh, this is the one where I'm kind of like I'm divided myself. I don't know if this is a great one or not, but bright light therapy. Some people say it's good. Getting one of those bright light devices. If you don't have natural light outside, then exposing yourself to light could be a good one.
Yeah, I'm being very good with that. I've been super good. Like I get out of my bed, I go to the gym, I get out, I go for a walk in the park. So I've been very good at not succumbing to the temptation to sleep during the day. I've conquered that.
That
so
is
I can
awesome.
I can give myself a pat on the back about that. And so I think you've been so kind, and you've been so generous, through this whole, I think, experience with your time. And I do want, before I forget, I do want to, have a chance to thank you. It was extremely touching, and I feel more supported than I felt since the issue started, and more so than talking to doctors. Which is why at a certain point I said to you, I said, "Do you offer, services, any sort of services like that?" Because what you were able to, the clarity that you were able to provide within, I think, a couple of minutes. I've been trying to get a clarity from doctor, to understand I think that was one of the biggest challenges, trying to understand my condition. And I didn't understand it. I only got to that clarity after, watching your videos and getting your feedback. And I think that was one of the pitfalls, one of the negatives about this whole journey is that I wish I understood my condition as well as I do now. I wish I had understood it before. So I wanted to thank you for that. Like,
Anytime.
now I'm so much more confident about, what's happening to me. I feel so much more confidence. So now, when family members and friends who are concerned come and they have all these different suggestions, now I say them to them with a lot of confidence. Thank you for your suggestion, but I know exactly what's happening with me, and I feel so confident about that.
Right. Yeah. That's another big one. We could just talk about that one for a second. But yeah, it's super, super thank you. And I'm so happy to hear this. And It is a huge problem. The lack of understanding of insomnia in the medical community, huge problem. Which, by the way, now I have to say it. I just today published a book on Amazon called "Why We Don't Sleep," and it's just about this, how like there's no understanding of it, and etc. So if you feel like it, definitely get that one and leave it a review. But yeah, I have to head out now. But it's been super nice talking to you, Natasha. And I'll let's say how about we'll email, of course. But how about we talk again in about 3 weeks?
Yes, I would really like that. And I look forward to checking out your book. Congratulations, by the way.
No, thank you, Natasha, and thanks so much again for coming on.
All right. Ciao, Danielle. Bye.
Bye bye.